My name is Craig Morrison. I'm the executive producer and game director on Age of Conan. And what we're looking at today is some gameplay exclusive from the new expansion that's coming out very shortly, The Rise of the Godslayer. And what we wanted to do is show some of the cool and interactive gameplay elements that are going to come to life in the instanced encounters that players will get to play through in Rise of the Godslayer. So here we're in the Celestial Necropolis, which is one of the dungeon instances based off Karakorum, which is kind of a craterous region in the middle of Kitai where an ancient evil is slowly seeping into the world. And the players are investigating this crater. And what we've challenged the game designers to do is trying to find some really interesting gameplay elements. So what you can see here is the players have reached a chasm and they see some buttons on the ground with icons on them. And they can also see some NPCs on the other side that are using the in-game emotes, the animation system. And what the players have to do is they figure out here they have to use the in-game emotes to trigger the bridge to come together, very visually. You know, it doesn't just pop out of nowhere, it actually comes together from the scenery in a very spectacular fashion. And what they then find is, though, if they step off the buttons, the bridge disappears. So they're faced with a choice. The players have to really try and figure out how best to cross this bridge. So what they figure out, they have to leave 3 of their team on the other side so that the other 3 can go across and try and get those NPCs off of the pads on the other side so that they can activate the bridge from the other side and bring their friends across so that everyone can proceed. And this gameplay isn't just about the context of this one individual puzzle. What we've tried to do with the content in Rise of the Godslayer, particularly in the dungeons, is give the players, kind of teach them about the mechanics as we go through. A lot of the times in MMOs, you find that the boss encounters these days, they're getting very complex. And likewise, we try and make very complex and interesting encounters at the ends of dungeons. But often you find they're very kind of arbitrarily placed at the end of the dungeon. And the only way for the players to be able to combat the bosses is trial and error. You know, you go in and then you fail, and you go back and you've learned a little something and you do some more. Here, we're actually using mechanics that they're going to have to use in the final encounter throughout the course of the instance. So the player is being given visual cues and visual lessons about what they can come to expect when they face the final boss. So here, for example, you can see our intrepid group have kind of reached the doors of the final boss, and now they've figured out these pads and what the icons on them represent, so they know that they use the emote system. You can see one of the guys is going to go down into his kind of meditation pose, and that's what activates that pad. And then the other guy, I think he's actually going to cry. And I think this is the first time in MMO game systems where we've actually used the animation system. The emotes that players can do actually triggers gameplay. And we do this quite a lot through the course of the expansion. There's various instances where the emote system actually comes into play. But in this case, you can see them here activating the other side of the door to allow their 2 team members through. And the boss is up on that platform behind them, waiting to start. And when the boss starts the encounter, he's going to use these mechanics that the players have learnt in the course of the encounter. So here you can see he actually goes and he does an emote, and he activates one of the pillars around the room. And a guardian spawns that protects that pillar. So if the players manage to kill the guardian, they're able to remove the force field that activates another of these pads. So if they've been watching the boss, they know which emote they have to do to activate the pillar. And it comes down very spectacularly, lines up so they can climb up to the pillar. It's not just like a teleport. You know, it's something visual that the players can engage with. And they can fight the boss for a time at the top of the platform. But then as any MMO player knows, when things glow red and start to come down from the ceiling, it's probably a bad sign. And then they get expelled off the top of the platform, and the boss goes and he does the next emotion in the link. And the players have to keep following this. And it's also important and interesting to note that our game modes actually have a hard mode for the dedicated hardcore players. That if the players do a certain emote that they're taught through the course of the gameplay from quest NPCs and from quest dialogue, that there's one particular emote that's going to anger this boss. And if they do that, they actually activate all 6 pillars at once, all 6 guardians, and have to deal with the boss at the same time. But if they manage to complete that, they actually get better rewards. So it kind of gives great replay value to the more dedicated players because they can play through it normally, learn the tactics, and then once they're comfortable with that, they can really amp it up and take it to the hard mode as well to enjoy subsequent playthroughs of the dungeon. And now, just in closing, one of the other locations in Pillars of Heaven, this is one of the earlier dungeons that you see in the expansion. And this is a boss called Brass Mask. And now movement as being part of an MMO boss encounter isn't new. Lots of games have done it. But what we're trying to do in the expansion is make sure it makes sense in context to the player, so it's not arbitrary and they're not just dying for the sake of it. Here, archers above this courtyard rain down arrows, and when the players see that's going to happen, they have to run under the bamboo cover to kind of avoid the arrows. So we've tried to make it make sense in context for the player. You know, if the boss is lobbing fireballs at you and there happens to be a waterfall nearby, it might be an idea to run behind the waterfall. You know, so that the players get visual hints through the course of the gameplay that allow them to really discover what's going to happen in the encounter, and it's not just going to surprise them and they're going to die and then they have to go back and retry. So players who pay attention will really be rewarded and get some really interesting and dynamic gameplay through the course of the expansion.